This is Jim. I think I mentioned a while back that I was going to do some reviews of books, and today I'm going to try the first one. This is a really good novel written in 1975 by James Clavell called Shōgun. It was a pretty big, popular book at the time, and it became even more popular after the book was made into a TV miniseries in the U.S., which starred Richard Chamberlain. The book is set in the late 1500s and follows the story of an English navigator captain called Blackthorne, John Blackthorne, and he led a Dutch ship to Japan at the time. And of course, that was a huge journey back in those days. And in the book, it took him over 2 years to make the journey from the Netherlands, Rotterdam, to Japan. At that time, they did not have very good charts and stuff, and they had somehow gotten a hold of Portuguese navigation documents called a rudder, which allowed him to make it to Japan via the Straits of Magellan, which is at the end of the tip of South America. So amazingly long journey, and they made it. They started out with several ships, but at the end there was only one ship, and the story doesn't really cover the trip, but only one ship survived the journey, and many of the sailors passed away and died before they got to Japan. And at the end, they actually kind of crashed in a storm and stuff, and he was cast ashore, and only a few of the crew survived. The ship also was okay, but he was washed overboard, and he found himself in Japan. He didn't know he was in Japan for sure, but he suspected it, and that's what they were trying to do, is get to Japan. At that time, Japan was completely separate or isolated from the rest of the world, and the only Europeans who had been there would be the Portuguese and Spanish. The Portuguese and Spanish were Catholic, and they pretty much controlled everything in the Pacific at that time. And they were fighting against the Netherlands and England, and because they were Protestant countries. So there's the religion plays a role in the story, and it's very interesting to learn about the different parts of the religion. So we have John Blackthorne as the major character of the story, and he's the pilot, and he finds himself in Japan, and he doesn't speak the language, he doesn't understand them, he totally doesn't understand the culture, and he very quickly gets thrown into their culture, and he finds out right away that most of the Japanese are not Christians, and they really don't care for Christians. They also, their culture, the Dutch, he wanted to go there to get trade and make money. To the samurai warriors of the time, which were basically the leaders of the Japanese culture, the top of the culture, that was not a good thing. He kept saying, "Oh, I want to trade," and they're like, "Huh, that's not good." They looked down on merchants, because they were all about honor and war and stuff like that. That was their culture. So they really didn't have a very high opinion of Blackthorne as he came ashore, and he was very quickly basically imprisoned and threatened with death. It shows that the samurai had the power of life and death over the ordinary people of Japan and everyone else. In the early part of the book, a peasant or fisherman fails to bow to a samurai, and the samurai pulls his sword out and cuts his head off right there, just like that. And Blackthorne is shocked, and it's like, "Oh boy, I better be careful here because these guys are really serious." Unfortunately, he does not speak the language, and the only people who do are the are the Catholic priests who are there. So the Catholic priests are the only ones who speak the language, and he has to use them basically as an interpreter. And of course they call him a pirate and say that he's bad, and they tell him, oh yeah, the Japanese will execute pirates and stuff. So he doesn't trust them right away. And of course, but the Japanese samurai are smart too. And they can tell that the Blackthorn and the Catholics do not get along, and they don't trust the Catholic priests either, or some of them don't. And Omi-san, who is the first samurai that Blackthorn meets, is pretty smart, and he catches that on right away. But he imprisons Blackthorn, and the remainder of his crew. I think there were only like 9 or 10 of guys that were still alive, and they're in prison and wait for Yabu, who's the daimyo, or the king, or the prince of that region or that province, to come, and it'll be up to him to see what happens, because he has complete control over anything that happens in his province. So eventually Yabu comes, and Omi, and Yabu says, okay, I confiscate your ship on all the money and the guns, which are important and stuff, and we're going to keep all that, and you'll be allowed to live. But you have to give me one of your men as a sacrifice. And Blackthorn's, no, you can't do that. And of course, Yabu, he's like a king. He can do whatever he wants, and he doesn't care what Blackthorn says, and he says, but it cannot be Blackthorn. It cannot be the pilot, engine, they call him. And so they take one of the men and they boil him alive, and he's screaming and yelling, and it's like, because Yabu's kind of a sick character, and he really enjoys causing pain to other people, and even the other Japanese characters in the story don't like that and are quite disgusted by it, but he's high up, they can't do anything about it. So anyway, eventually Blackthorn submits to them, and he agrees to behave, or else they will all be killed. And just as Yabu is all excited because he gets the ship and he gets the guns and he gets the money, another samurai shows up, and his name is Hiramatsu, and he is the right-hand man of Toranaga, who is on the Council of Regents. And now we really get into the politics of the time, and basically he says, oh, thank you, Yabu, for giving this to Toranaga. And Yabu's like, he cannot say no, and he basically has to give the ship to Toranaga because Toranaga is so powerful. And now begins the big political thing, and Blackthorn ends up going with Hiramatsu to meet Toranaga, who is in Osaka Castle, which is where the regents are. And there's 2 main factions, Ishido and Toranaga, and these 2 are trying to get control of the council, which then will control the whole country of Japan. And that's what they're trying to do. And they're vying against each other in politics and stuff. And Blackthorn ends up being right in the middle of this. And very quickly after he arrives at Osaka, he becomes, him and Toranaga kind of hit it off. I mean, even though they don't speak the language, and Toranaga brings his own interpreter, a young woman named Mariko, and she is then his interpreter, because he explains that he does not trust the priests, even though some of the priests are honest in what he says and translating faithfully. He still does not trust them, and they are at cross purposes. The Catholics don't like the Protestants don't like the Catholics, and so they definitely, there's animosity. And Toranaga is very smart, brilliant in fact, and he realizes that very quickly and gets his own interpreter. Now, of course, there's a bit of a romantic part to this story as well, and eventually, I'm not going to go into all the details, but eventually Blackthorn falls in love with Mariko, and that's a whole another part of the story, which is quite fascinating. And then But one of the neat things is, it was Tornaga asks Blackthorn, he says, when he finds out that the Dutch Netherlands was actually fighting against Spain because they were part of Spain. So they've broken away from Spain. They're fighting for their own independence. And Tornaga goes, oh, so you fight against your rightful king? And he goes, yes, we disagree on our religion and stuff. And he goes, well, so you're a rebel and you're a traitor and all this type of thing. And he goes, that's bad. And then Blackthorn says, yes, unless you win. And Tornagus stands there and he goes, oh. And he starts laughing. He goes, yes, that's the one thing. If you win, then it's okay. And because he's very smart and he realizes that, you win, then you can do whatever you want. But if you lose, you've forfeited everything. So it's a good story, and I've only touched on a few minor, just a small amount of it. The culture stuff is fascinating. One thing that I really loved was bathing. It was really interesting because the Europeans of the time thought that bathing was bad for you, and they would only bathe a couple of times a year. So you can imagine what they smelled like. The Japanese culture, totally different. They felt it was very important to bathe daily, probably, or very, very frequently. And when Blackthorn first shows up, they're like, "Oh, you smell bad. You need to take a bath." And he goes, "What? No, I'm not going to." And they force him to. And then after he takes the bath, he's like, "Oh, this is fantastic," and he really enjoys it. He's got the lady shampooing his hair and washing him, and he's like, "Oh, this is good." And then after that, he sees his crew, which aren't staying with him, and they're filthy and disgusting, and they're with lice. And he goes back to where he's staying at the Japanese house, and he goes, "I need a bath right now," because he very quickly becomes a convert to understanding that bathing can be quite good. And so that's pretty fun. As I mentioned, a miniseries was written about, made from the book, and it was quite good. It was Richard Chamberlain was in it, and it's not available on streaming, but you can find the Blu-ray disc of it, and that's quite good. If you get an opportunity to watch it, I really recommend it. I think you'd enjoy it. One interesting thing about the miniseries is that it is completely from Blackthorn's perspective. So you don't understand what the Japanese people are saying. There's no subtitles. They're speaking Japanese to Blackthorn, but Blackthorn, remember, did not understand Japanese. So you learn, along with Blackthorn, what the Japanese are saying and intending, and you know what? It really worked. The book is extremely complex, and if you watch the miniseries and you enjoyed it, read the book, because the book, now you will get to look behind and see what all of the Japanese people were saying and thinking and planning and scheming and plotting. There's so much more depth to it. It would have been lovely, of course, to try to incorporate that into the miniseries, but I think it would have been horribly complex. And what they did worked. But if you like the movie or the miniseries, read the book. And if you've read the book, watch the miniseries. You'd find it very interesting, and it's pretty faithful to the story, to the book. It doesn't include every detail, of course, as most of those type of things don't, but it's really good. I know one thing: when you get to the end of the book and the movie, you're kind of like, there's a nice conclusion, but they could have just kept going. There could have been another book. But he didn't write another book, and you kind of left to think, well, what happened to Blackthorn? Another interesting thing is that Blackthorn's character was actually based on a real person. And so were many of the characters in the novel and the miniseries. And I'll show a I have a little chart here I got off of Wikipedia, which kind of says the names of the people. William Adams was the name of the Englishman who this story is based on. It's not exact, and it was very fictionalized and for sure, but it was based on real people, and it was a fascinating story. And I really recommend you watching the miniseries or reading the book. It's like I said, I've read the book probably 3 or 4 times. There's also an audio book, and I'll show a picture of it here as well, which you can get off of Audible, which is an Amazon company. And it's really very well done too. Very, very nicely done. But it's long. It's like 56 hours to listen to the whole thing. But seriously, once you start listening to it and you get hooked on it, it's pretty good. One of the things that's nice about the book too is it doesn't preach. It moves along nicely. You know, it doesn't spend like a massive amount of time explaining the language or the culture. It's sprinkled throughout the story so that you learn it really kind of nicely, and it's not like trying to read a textbook or something. It's a really, really well written story. So enjoy it, check it out. I recommend it. I hope you enjoyed me talking about it. I've left out a lot of stuff. There's so many parts in this that I did not cover because, of course, you want to experience it for yourself. So give it a try. I give it a definite thumbs up. Great book. Take care.
Like, comment, and subscribe will be really appreciated. Thank you for watching.